Hope everybody's doing good today. Appreciate you being here. Obviously, a busy weekend here on campus, and for the athletic department, men's and women's basketball, with some big victories, as well as the cross country team advancing to nationals, and of course our game with Arizona. Certainly some really good tape. Learn a lot more about ourselves. We're continuing to improve in several areas, and others we want to continue to improve upon. Some personal updates for you guys. The big one, of course, was Micah. Micah did suffer a break in his arm, and his recovery time will be about 6 weeks. CJ is good. CJ had a hyperextension of his elbow, and by the end of the game, he was fine. Aside from that, I thought Bryson was banged up, but he wasn't really. Just took a shot throughout the course of the game in his leg or whatnot, so he's good to go. And aside from that, I think we are good on injuries. And that being said, open to questions.
Right here, front left, James.
With Micah, Mario, multiple family members indicated 2020. It looked like he was in the hospital this morning. You said 6 weeks. Is it any chance for a postseason for a bowl game, or is that off the table?
No, we'll see. I mean, we're always hopeful of that. I mean, he's proven before he's a quick healer. He overcame a really significant injury, but when I say significant, obviously one that it's pretty painful and whatnot, and from a tough collision. But I mean, modern medicine and the way that our training staff, our medical staff, is second to none. I mean, the very best in the country. And Mike is a guy that attacks every opportunity to get better 100 miles per hour. So, if anyone could heal quickly, it will be him. And if the timeline matches up, certainly that's a consideration.
Front left, Matt.
I guess the fallout of that, Daywood's now listed back at receiver again. Just is that the only change, or do you explore other options for just the depth purposes of that position?
Well, I think you always explore all your options. I think Justin Collins is a guy last year in this game proved to be really valuable. Caught a slant down there and got us in the tight red zone at the end of the half, and he's been coming along. Remember, he's coming off an ACL as well. And then you have guys like Crocker and Waters and Will Hoyt, with Will Hoyt and Waters coming off of injury. They're a little ways off in terms of the system and whatnot, and Crocker continues to get better. But, yeah, there's a lot on the table. There's a lot of guys we want to continue looking at, and certainly, you look at a guy like Darren Felix and how much more he's provided for us as well. So we feel confident that although it's painful, really is to lose a guy like Micah, relentless competitor, awesome guy to be around, real productive, great football player that will find solutions.
On the right, Ryan.
Mario, obviously you had injuries at tight end as well, and Schooler leaving and Pittman in and out. But Herbert's completion percentage is way up this year compared to last year. How do you kind of explain his improved efficiency?
I think it's a little bit of everything. We know he's got a tremendous amount of pride in his craft and how he approaches it. A student of the game, another year in the system. I think, Coach Arroyo's done a great job just finding answers, particularly to some of the different challenges that we face coverage-wise in the conference. The people that cloud the coverage or play press man on the inside guy or both guys or the outside guy. The receivers and Coach Bo have done a great job of just creating a very strong culture of excellence, demanding a lot of each other, pushing each other. The level of competition in that room has certainly increased. So I think it's a combination of things. And, at the end of the day, it's the passing game is always about timing, precision, right? Guys playing with toughness, because, throwing and catching is not only just, done on air. It's done with some physicality and making sure they're able to withstand the rigors that come with the tackles and getting off press coverage, the physicality goes with it. So overall, I'd say it's just a great collective effort.
After reviewing the film, anything stand out, either positive or negative, that you maybe miss without watching it the first time?
Oh, man. Wow. How much time do we have here today? I mean, there's always things that when you look at film closely, when you really, really study it, and I'm talking about like rep 12 on that particular player and then go down 12 for each other, and you see a lot of improvement in technique and fundamentals, particularly by the front seven. I thought that really, really stood out. Our tackling improved. I thought our attention to detail, particularly communication on defense, which was a huge point of emphasis during the bye week, that really showed up because of the very tempos of Arizona. It was going to be a challenge. When they get going fast, you've got to line up. You've got to have a call in place. When they shift or they motion, you've got to have a secondary call to go to. Thought that was awesome. I thought getting off to a fast start on offense was great. I thought coming out from the 1 yard line and not scoring, especially not scoring a touchdown, it's inexcusable. So something like that stood out. We improved from a penalty standpoint, but still had two that were just inexcusable. At least one that's inexcusable. And, message sent there. So there's progress in those areas. We had one penalty on offense, a holding call, which that looked like a sumo match in there. So kind of got wrapped up and it happened. But pleased a lot of areas and a lot of areas to improve. I don't know if I answered anything you asked there, but sorry about that.
James.
A couple other personnel things, Mario. One, Pickett, I know was suspended the first half because of the targeting, but didn't play at all. What went into that just decision where you knew you were going to play Brady? I'm sure Steven earned time, but nevertheless not to play Nick at all. And secondly, with that and all these other issues, can you speak to you mentioned last year, like you were very below the scholarship number. This year you started at 85, but you're entering these weeks right now where, by my count last week, you had 60 available players based on the guys you want to redshirt. That's a pretty lean number, and you're obviously executing at a really high level. So just can you speak to that, the depth that you have with that?
I'm writing down all your questions because you got about 6 of them, okay? The first one, in terms of Nick set out the first half. He did play some in the second half. Him not playing as much was probably a combination of both. Just things were kind of rolling the way they were, and it's not an indication of anything else. Both those guys are, week in and week out listed as one or the other starting because they both compete their tails off and do a really good job. Which was your second of 6 questions? I forgot.
You have a pretty lean number.
Lean number. Well, I think we're at, in terms of actual scholarship players, I believe we're at 81. The 20, when you look at that number also, you got to realize if a guy's played 3 games and you still want to save that shirt, you still have that one game to play him. You want to be real strategic about that. God forbid you should have a really bad injury in the next couple of weeks. Now you could really invest in a guy being that guy for this week and maybe the other. Let's say it's a defensive lineman, right? Let's say it's a Christian or a Keon, right, who are right there at the cusp. They're really good players. You want to play them, but you also want to. Now you could pick and choose which game that guy plays. So it is strategic. But I don't feel that we're lean. I felt we were lean at wide receiver. Obviously, that's why David's coming over. But aside from that, we feel good about the roster.
Gary, on the right.
Yeah, Coach, a question about injuries, the possible risk and reward of playing certain players. Johnny Johnson, for example, I don't know how many times he's on the kickoff coverage, but I just go back 2014, Devin Allen, Olympic sprinters or hurdlers, injured for the season on a kickoff return, and then the next year, the second game of the season, I think Nebraska, he's on the punt return coverage out. His career ends. So, is it really worth the risk for Johnny Johnson to be when he's such a valuable member right now of the team? Does it really help the kickoff coverage that much?
100% it does. And we will never devalue one phase for another. Special teams are just as important as offense and defense. And the moment you start thinking that it's not, and you start treating it as that other thing you do when you're not playing offense and defense, is when the culture of your team will rot from the inside out. And historically, a place I've been lucky enough to be at, you would find our punt and punt return teams littered with future first-round picks because it's important, and it's important for your team to know it's important.
Warren, front row.
Coach, away from injuries, I was curious about the culture of this football team. You've talked a lot about that in the past. What's the linkage between the culture now and being 9-1? How much has the culture changed here to this record? And I'm also curious about the implementation of your player council and how much of an effect that's had on this team.
Trying to figure out where to start on that. I think it starts first and foremost with recognize that Oregon's been good for a really, really long time. And that's like priority number one as you go forward. Our starting point here was when things kind of took a hit, right? Things were not going so well, but even when that happens, you got to quickly recognize things did go well. And there's the fabric, right? The fiber, the DNA of the program. is is in those that came before us, and then the things that we bring to the table. And when you do that, when you bring a blueprint that's because the style of play is different, and because trench play, line of scrimmage play is so emphasized, it really requires a certain offseason and a regimentation, an attitude, and a physicality that's going to be very demanding. One that that's really not for everybody, and that's okay. I mean, football is right, different styles for different folks and whatnot. So when something is as challenging and demanding as that is, your leadership council, like you mentioned, becomes the most instrumental and critical. They play the most critical role in being able to push forward, because it does get tough. And I'm sure there are moments in time where it's like, man, is this really worth it? This is really hard and demanding. Not in the wrong kind of way, in the right kind of way. Because we have a saying around here, it's easy to be tough with somebody else's body. We don't ever go past that line. We have a GPS system, a catapult system that measures everybody's output, workload, accelerations, decelerations, all that good stuff. But when your team is bought in and it's led, it's player led, and there's ownership in it, man, they just start demanding from each other, and actually they won't tolerate anything less from each other than each other's very, very best. And so that's echoed constantly. That becomes truly a part of the DNA. And like when you watch our players now throughout the course of the week, the way they handle meetings, the way they handle walkthroughs, the way they demand of each other in practice, and the way that they handle everything leading up to the game, up to that pregame, moment in the locker room, and then the sideline throughout the course of the game. It's all the things that have been emphasized are becoming a reality, and that reality and their work is being validated in the results that they're having.
Can you give an example of how the Leadership Council maybe has played an important role during the season?
I think it's in everything we do. I think you find it in, it's like having another, 16, 18 generals, guys that truly carry out the messaging and live it. They actually carry it out by example. They voice it, they echo it, and then they hold others accountable to it. Specific examples, man, it's in everything we do. It's arriving early, it's staying late, it's making sure that we're running on and off the field. Little things that people kind of say, oh, why is that a big deal? Well, because it is a big deal. Because in everything you do, you're sending a message to the other side, right? Running on and off the field, making sure, we look the same. Guys are dressed the right way. You don't have officials complaining that, guys are kind of wearing their own uniform stuff and doing their own thing. That guys are paying attention when they're the twos and they're watching the ones go and walk through, and it's a critical detail as it relates to a particular blitz or a pressure play. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I don't want to bore you, put you to sleep here, but it's in everything. The best way to put it is this. Our guys have adopted that. They're, people always say, take care of the little things. There are no little things. They're all big things. So we treat them all as big things, important things, and that way nothing slips through the cracks.
On the left, Rob.
Any message for Camden after the game? Just what you feel like his confidence is still there after missing a couple kicks?
Well, it's he missed, and I know he feels awful for it, but you got to press on and get better. I mean, football's still a development sport. That guy's very talented. He has done it before, and he's done it in practice, and got to get back out there to work tomorrow and get better and do it again.
On the right, Ryan.
Mario, Herm Edwards obviously lived up to his statement. You play to win the games, going for 2 the other night at Oregon State. What kind of game are you expecting from Arizona State? Obviously, they're going to try to do everything they can to upset what you guys have going. What do you see from Arizona State?
Excuse me. They're as talented as any team you'll see. They really do, on both sides of the ball. Defensively, they're very disruptive. I mean, they're bringing some type of gamer stunt 35, 38% of the time. Pressure or a stunt well over 50% of the time. They play the Tillman position, in honor of, Mr. Tillman and all the great things he did, which is very different because that alignment now puts you in a predicament whether are you going to count them, not count them. It's an ID issue as it relates to the run game, the passing game. It helps them disguise coverages. It gives them better angles. They're just very disruptive. They're very disruptive. They force you to make plays. They're not going to allow you to they're not going to hand over easy plays. So they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They create a lot of negative plays. And then when you look over on the other side, their receivers, I'm sure you've seen a lot of film. I mean, there are a lot of make one guy miss and go and take it to the house. They've done it against man coverage on slants, simple slants, slant and goes, double moves. Eno is as good as it gets as a running back. He runs behind an offensive line that's playing really well. They're physical. They're athletic. They get on blocks. They stay on blocks. Their quarterback, both quarterbacks are talented guys. They don't play like freshmen. They don't. Very talented. They do it with their arm, with their feet, quick decisions. The system lends to them getting the ball out quick so they don't have to take pressure or sacks. I see a very experienced, well-coached, and very talented football team that plays really good football.
Time for two more. Matt on the left.
We've made a big deal about the last two recruiting classes at Oregon, but what do you say of the 17 class? I think 14 of those guys are on the two deep, and just their importance of turning this team where they're at right now.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I think everybody in the program, when you look at teams and their progression, it takes everybody, right? The 17 class, even before arrival, the 16 class. I always think back to, 4 and 8. You go through a 4 and 8 season, that'll test you now. It'll test you in a bunch of different ways. Everybody in your ear, do this, do that, don't listen to this or do that. And then the 17 class to come in, despite that, and really say, hey, we're going to help turn this thing around. So tremendous amount of credit to both those classes, the entire team. But in reference to your question, yeah, those guys, a lot of them played as true freshmen, right? They had to go right away and never flinch. So super proud of those guys.
James, last question.
Try and kill two birds here, Mario. One on Cam, a follow on Cam, because these are some season-long struggles and it's kickoffs as well, and it's impacting field position and stuff. Can either Blake or Tom Snee handle any of this? Is there competition at that position in any facet of kicking? And secondly, because it came up nationally this past weekend, especially with Tua's injury, there was a lot of murmuring in the stadium on that final possession about Justin still being in the game. How do you approach that late in a 4-score game? Because obviously you're hearing the criticism Nick is taking as a result of this, and that was before halftime. How do you approach that?
All right, the first thing is Blake and Tom, they're not kickers by trade. I know they're punters, and a lot of times people think they could do both. They don't. Henry Cattleman is our other kicker, and he does a heck of a job. And every single week those guys compete. So, and both those guys have gotten better. I know the game didn't work out in their show as such, but we have faith that he'll get back on track and that Cattleman will continue pushing. In terms of Justin being late in the game, I don't know what is defined as late or not an opportunity where a guy should be playing or not. I know that what we had called were really safe and good plays to continue moving the football, and we play football here at Oregon. So